you know, technology in education, we are undergoing tremendous disruption in almost every field. But over the last few years, we've seen this tremendous disruption in education from what they call MOOCs or MOOCs, massively, someone help me. Massively open online courses. And who would like to tackle what this is all about and why the big disruption to education first?
Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here, and want to support and thank David for bringing us all together. This is amazing. So if we haven't thanked David enough, let's do it one more time.
Thank you, Sree.
And I got to tell you, when I told people I'm at a Chief Digital Officer Summit, the jokes kind of write themselves, right? So here are some that came in. CDOs are decisive. They can only say yes or no. CDOs say yes with a thumbs up and nay with a middle finger, and it keeps going on after that. Those are the ones I could read to you. But this is really, I think this shows the fact that you're all here, shows you kind of the convening power that David has, but also shows us kind of the importance of all of us connecting and talking. Several people said to me, can't you just do this in a virtual environment? Can't you just meet on the cloud? Why are you here? And it's one of the things that I have learned in doing all this technology stuff is that it's so important, this kind of physical connection and the way we meet together is important. Now, I don't agree all the way that Marissa Mayer has gone, where nobody should work at home and they should all come in. You've all followed that, right? That's an incredible, stunning change that I strongly disagree with, and that can be another forum for another time. And especially for a brand new mother to make it sound so easy, and she has a nursery next to her office. So it's a whole other thing, but you can see I'm very worked up about that. But that's another another conversation. So let's talk about MOOCs, as he said. So I think that universities, and most of you know, move very slowly, and watching them change is it happens very slowly. Obviously, Harvard, which in literally and figuratively has led the education world for so many years. And it's so nice to have Perry on this panel because she's kind of my CDO mentor, even though she doesn't know it. She was the first person I called when we were thinking of this job. That MOOCs are going to be part of the conversation about the changing world. And for years, I've been trying to get universities to think more digitally and asking for kind of more attention to this tech space. And now I've learned, be careful what you wish for. Because now with this MOOC stuff, there's just so much happening and so much confusion. I don't know if you saw the piece that Tom Friedman wrote the other day in the New York Times. It was typical Tom, you know, the world is flat, it's flatter than you ever thought, the revolution is happening at this second, and the only thing missing from this piece was a cab driver in Istanbul who had taken a course from Stanford and was now saving his village because he was running a nonprofit. You know, that was the only thing missing from this. And as a result of that, it just increases the rhetoric and the tension around this. Education institutions, I keep saying, change so slowly, but I don't think any piece of technology has swept through and caused hype, consternation, and panic as MOOCs have in such a short period. Think about it. They didn't have this concept till Sebastian Thrun created his first class at Stanford in September 2011.
Wow.
That's 18 months ago. By June the following year, UVA had fired its president in part because she wasn't moving fast enough. Coursera, this big company that everybody...
And Sebastian's Udacity.
Yeah,
right.
and Sebastian started Udacity. And by the way, Sebastian's the guy who's creating the driverless cars. So if you want a technology to worry about that, not about the university. But that's how quickly things move. They, of course, hired back the UVA president, but that's how fast. I don't think any piece of technology, not electricity, not the telephone, not email, has gone so quickly through academia as the MOOCs have. But the MOOCs are only a tiny part of what's going to happen and how universities are going to be disrupted. I believe that my job as CDO is to look at MOOCs as a part of an overall strategy and should be less than 20% of my time. But because of the buzz and the press and all of this about it, it's about 80% of the agita around online education. And that's really unfortunate because places around the world are changing, in very smart ways. And Harvard and MIT have put in $30 million each to build edX, and I'm sure you'll hear a little bit more about that.
And maybe, are there just a couple of examples like Udacity or Coursera or
and edX?
Yeah, so the people who might not be familiar with MOOCs.
The three names to know are edX, Coursera, and Udacity.
In that order.
Exactly. And they're all, what's stunning is how quickly they're moving. So just this past week, the two main ones have already announced the doubling of the number of universities and doubling of kind of the countries they're hitting. And so Tom Friedman says there's nothing in the world that is going to help with getting people out of poverty than MOOCs. And I love MOOCs as much as anybody else, but is that really true? I mean, what about clean water, electricity? I mean, isn't that more important? So this hype we have to separate from the promise of this stuff. And the final thing I would say is if we think about this in a more rational way, that MOOCs are going to be part of the larger strategy and they're going to have an impact. And to me, the thing that doesn't get discussed enough, and the person who's really changing the world, is Sal Khan. And so I hope you all know who he is. If he isn't, you should. I'll try to pull up here just a quick thing that I'll just hold it up here. But Sal Khan, who runs Khan Academy, is doing more to change the world than almost anybody I know. And Sal is, it's only been a few years since he's started he was trying to teach his cousin math on the internet, and now has had more than 230 million views of his content and 3,800 lessons created. If you're looking for his Twitter handle, it's @Sal Khan Academy, S-A-L Khan Academy. And I think that what he's doing means that the kind of students coming through the ranks from 4th grade onwards, they're going to come to the university and say, what are you doing that's different from what you've been doing for 300 years, 200 years, whatever? And we have to be prepared, and this is just the start of that.
To get a good background on this, I don't know if Jack Hittery is here. I know he said he would make it, but if Jack's not here, he wrote a great piece in Forbes called The Revolution, if you want to Google it, Top 10 Disruptors of Education. And he lists, Khan, edX, Udacity, Coursera. Gives you a quick overview. And Sal, as you mentioned, Sal Khan started making videos for his cousins to learn science and math. And, it's just now it offers more than 4,000 videos. The site is just incredible what he's done with a very limited budget. So, Perry, any perspective on that from Harvard University?
The interest is tremendous and the hype is tremendous. I think one of the most important things to remember is it can't be a flight from quality. And I think that's what Harvard is trying to do in partnership with MIT around edX. We're trying to do really 3 main things: increase access to learning, improve the on-campus learning experience, and conduct real research into how people learn. And I think if you stay close to your mission around quality, I mean, Harvard's lived through a lot of disruptive technologies, right? The Civil War, the telegraph, a lot of stuff has happened since Harvard was founded. Exactly. The telephone, the car, these were all new technologies to Harvard at one point. So in a way, edX is Harvard doing what Harvard's always done, which is figure out ways to deliver premium quality education. But think of the opportunities posed by scale for the Khan Academies and the MOOCs of the world. How can we reach more people with terrific content, but not sacrifice the quality we stand for?
Great point. And Bernardo, from the perspective of Kaplan test prep, does this affect, how do MOOCs affect Kaplan?
Sure. So innovation is being disrupted big time now. I think if you look back at where media was 15 years ago, we're probably in the same place. Basically, it's exciting because we don't know what's going to happen really over the next 5 to 10 years. If you look at some facts, Coursera was launched less than a year ago, and they have today more than 60 universities in their system. They have more than 300 courses. They have more than 3 million students that have enrolled, and given the completion rate, which is about 5 to 10%, about 150, 200,000 students have finished a course in Coursera. What does that mean? Let's look at a couple of metrics here. Let's just try to approximate this. Maybe not a very good metric around value. What is the value that these courses give to students? And as a way to approximate it, let's use the amount of money they pay today to go to those classes. They pay about $1,000. So if you look at the whole volume, 200,000 students graduating through these courses, that probably generate about $200 million of intrinsic value. It's not a perfect metric, but there's something in that order. If you look at another metric, if you pick a database course, for example, for Coursera, 6,000 people, 60,000 entered, 6,000 people completed it. So 6,000 people, if you think about it, the same professor at Stanford, 20, 30 people in the class, he can go through 60 students a year. And in 6 weeks, in 8 weeks, he had 6,000. It would have taken 100 years for him to teach the same number of people.
Okay.
So the disruption is happening. Is actually extraordinary.
Wow.
The question is, what is going to happen in the future? And I think there are two dimensions. One is quality. Is it going to get better? And I think it's going to get better. I think that this is like the first very early versions of the learning experience. And we have maybe too much video, maybe we have too little practice. We need to put some adaptive learning in it, some personalization to bring students that are falling behind. We need to understand how social media will play a role, how gaming can motivate students and gaming dynamics to stick with it a little more and maybe raise that 7 to 10% in completion rate to 15 and 20%. So, but it will get better. I mean, we at Kaplan have done a lot of work in understanding all that stuff. So, and I'm sure that very smart people from edX and Coursera and United will figure it out. We will get better. Then the question is, what industry is it going to disrupt? We think a lot about higher education, but if you think about corporate training, there's $170 billion spent in corporate training today, here in the US only. And at Coursera, they did some polls for certain classes, and 50% of the students that went to that class, I think it was an artificial intelligence class, 50% of them had jobs while they were taking those classes. 40% had jobs in software engineering. So the people that went to Coursera are not people that want to get a higher education. They want to get better at the job that they do. So that is a huge opportunity for disruption in corporate training.
Sure, and Sree, back to you. I mean, there are existing, your brief mainly is to investigate the online course offerings. It seems Columbia does have existing online programs, School of Continuing Education, School of Arts and is it Engineering School, others. So how are you balancing what you're offering there?
Right. So one of the things that we tell people is that Columbia has been doing distance and online education for decades. We can get 14 master's degrees from our engineering school without ever stepping foot on campus. So this is not like today's when suddenly we realize that we're doing this, but what we're trying to do is how do we coordinate this, and as Perry said, how do we improve existing tuition paying experience on campus? And I've always, and for the last year I've been saying that experimentation is going to help us learn, experimentation online is going to help us on campus. And some of it was kind of just inspirational and aspirational what I was saying, but now I can report kind of the first actual innovation. And we launched this week a course on 3 courses on Coursera from the engineering school, and anyone who wants to learn financial engineering or most transistors or natural language processing should check out our courses. And we have 100,000 students signed up for those courses. Now, what does that mean? How many will finish? I don't know. But here's the innovation. The professors released on Coursera in advance the first 2 weeks of material. That has never happened in any university setting because that's not how they're done. Imagine what that does to a university if every class one day at every university the professor would release the first week's worth of material. Then what happens is you go to a class, you all might remember the thing called a shopping period where you're kind of shopping classes and trying to check out is the professor at this level or that level, how does he or she speak, what is the atmosphere. That's an actual change that's going to benefit universities. And that's a tiny thing that we never thought of. And that's already happened. I know Ananta, who runs edX, has this great line where he says, like, more people have taken the MIT circuits class already on edX than have taken that course in the history of MIT, right? Something like that. And that's, I think, very exciting. And the more we can do to enhance the core experience of the students is important. And then the final part of this idea for me is Columbia has a group of global centers in several continents. And what we want to do is can we work on low residency programs for students and non-students and improve that through using online education.
Oh, fabulous. Perry, do you want to add to that? Because I'd like to kind of broaden it, because your brief at Harvard is broader. Sree is really focused on online education, but you have a broader brief at Harvard, unless you'd want to continue in the quality of your offerings.
So I concur with a lot of what Sree said about, how we need to experiment and innovate, and it will feed back into the residential experience of what we do at the university. So when I think about what it means for me to be a CDO at Harvard, it's a piece of thinking about the academic issues, but there's a lot in terms of thinking of how does Harvard tell its story online?
Mm-hmm.
How do you find Harvard online? How do you think about this, giant 376-year-old institution? And I think the role of the CDO in education is a little bit different than the role of the CDO in a corporation. Corporations are generally speaking a command and control environment, whereas education, we have, thousands of thought leaders, faculty and students on campus. If you think of the faculty and students, it's like we're putting on a Broadway show, and they're the talent. We're the stage direction, trying to get the lighting right and showcase the breadth and depth of what Harvard has to offer. Unlike some of the other CDOs who spoke earlier, we have a stronger hand in the social and the content marketing and content strategy for the university. So we partner with content creators around there, but we think a lot about the strategy and the systems. My office is actually called the Office of Digital Strategy. So we try to think about what are the strategy and systems we provide to help, really the very heavily distributed, Harvard University, which is, the business school, the law school, the college, think about presenting themselves online. So far that's been our differentiator from business, and it's been pretty successful.
When we spoke months ago, one of the quotes has probably evolved since then, but one of the quotes that kind of stuck out in my mind is, you don't see your competition, quote unquote, as other universities. You see your competition as the New York Times, other
Right.
publishers.
I think we're very close to media, and we're close to global brands in terms of how we, have our challenges. I loved what the gentleman from PBS said about, thinking he had to be PBS quality at YouTube sensibility. But I think Harvard, we have to be Harvard quality at BuzzFeed agility. We have to think about how do we position ourselves in a way that people can understand what Harvard is and what Harvard does. Because we're in a tough environment these days for higher education. That there's a lot of value beyond the value that's created for the students who sit on campus, value for people who watch our videos on YouTube, value for people who are treated in a hospital with a technology or an advance created by Harvard.
And I like it that, again, Bernardo's on this panel because education is broader than just the university setting. You've got P&L, right? You've got business units reporting up to you. You've got a number of units. Do you report into the CEO, COO?
Yeah, I report
What's
to
the
the
structure
CEO,
up and
happens to
down?
be here.
Thank you for coming. CEO and COO of Kaplan are here. Thank you.
Yeah, so our challenge is that we need to do education, do it well, and also make money at it. And so our job, and my job as a CDO, is to provide vision on what the landscape is going to be like, and which is tough. But the important thing is not to have the right vision. The important thing is to be ready to be wrong. And I like your example about Starbucks and Square, because the issue is that they put a lot of money into infrastructure, into platform, into being an open system, so that they could sit on the table with Jack Dorsey and make a deal. So when this deal of shortening the radius of turning a company around is very important. And when you think about technology is a big piece of it, obviously, but also the whole culture and governance and business development and product development is much, much harder to do. So if you think about it, to build an organization that is designed to be wrong is very difficult. And it is about to quickly be able to change. And that's a challenge. It is a multidimensional challenge. It's not only technology. It's not only having the right skills. It's a bunch of stuff around it. What we're doing, and it was also related to some of the panels this morning, is that we're trying to innovate from the core into the things that are bread and butter today, but also try to launch initiatives that are somehow independent from our core business, that can think differently and disrupt ourselves.
An example?
Yeah, so we're launching a new platform that we call Learning Pod, and it is pretty much on this region of an open platform that could disrupt ourselves. Right. But basically, it's an open platform to allow anybody in the world to author and distribute content for free, learning content for free. We think there's an interesting play there. So, but again, it has to be built outside of the P&L, outside of the corporate structure.
Yeah, let's broaden it a little bit more. You talk about K through 12, right? And tens of millions of students there, and some of the disruption going on there. Is Kaplan involved in that space?
Yeah, sure. The challenge with K12, it poses different challenges than higher ed. And K12 in this country has 60 million students in K12. About 6 million teachers in K12. All over the world is 1.4 billion students in K12. But the issue with the U.S. is this: we have students that are very technology savvy, digital savvy. They have a smartphone or a tablet. We have teachers that are very passionate about teaching our students, that are an integral part of their lives. And we have a bunch of innovators, entrepreneurs that want to make that ecosystem much better. But the barriers to entry are very, very, very hard to break. In terms of the budget cycle of schools, in terms of the sales cycles and the barriers to entry, the legacy systems in the school, the integration with those legacy systems, it is very difficult to innovate. Because if you want to build stuff that you want to sell, you have to compete with Pearson, McGraw, and the big publishers in that space. So what we're seeing today is that the disruption is happening from bottoms up. Companies like Edmodo, for example, that have a freemium offering to K12 are starting to get some foot ground there. But it's very tough. Not because there's a lack of ideas, it's because it's very tough to get into the school system.
Sure. You know, I know Stephen Laster. Is Stephen here? Stephen was CIO at Harvard University, became CDO at McGraw-Hill Education.
Yep.
And again, very interesting dynamics going on there, seeing a CEO come from Harvard to a CDO role. But Perry, I wanted to, you know, again, maybe since we have a little bit of time, talk about, because you've spoken so eloquently in the past about the challenges of women in technology in general and the few women we see in the CDO role. I think those numbers were staggering to show how many sort of white men between 30 and 60 there are. And, you know, what are some of the barriers you think that are preventing more women in technology and in CDO roles?
I mean, I think to an extent we fulfill what we envision. I was struck by the slides today. It said you can be any kind of CDO. You can be a scientist, you can be an adventurer, you can be a crystal ball reader, but you better be a man, right? That was very clear from the presentation. Those are the three things those people have in common. But I think there's a lot of polarizing headlines right now, whether it's about the nursery at Yahoo or Sheryl Sandberg's new Lean In book or Kara Swisher. There's a lot of discussion right now. I think it's really important to think, how do you lean in? I think Sheryl Sandberg's book has an excellent point. How do you lean in to get yourself at the table, to ask, you know, this role? No one came to my office and said, you know, Harvard really needs a CDO. How about you take that title? You know, I think women need to generate those opportunities. You know, I saw the title emerging and, you know, asked for it.
That's a great question. Do you, Sree, anyone, I mean, do you see a CDO at every university? I think Rutgers had one for a little while, August and Fal. Is this a sector that's going to grow, do you think?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think we're going to see more. Yeah.
Right.
No,
It's driven by the provost. This is driven by the top. I mean, who hired
In
you?
my case,
What was the...
Yeah.
I mean, but this also shows you how the title's not obvious what it is. So she and I do almost completely different things on a daily basis, but we're both supporting the university. My job is housed in the academic space, reporting to the top academic officer. And so that's a slightly different thing than, you know, that Perry does. But it's all part of trying to get the universities to think directly about this stuff.
And was it a direct result of the MOOCs? I mean, is now the impetus, wow, if we don't disrupt ourselves
She
a
was
year
way
ago?
ahead of us.
Yeah, clearly. How long have you been CDO?
About a year and a half.
A year and a half,
in
right.
July.
Which is ancient history in CD,
It's amazing.
in education space.
It's fascinating,
They,
right.
you know, for technologies.
I certainly don't want to drive this discussion because I know there's probably a lot of questions. We have about 15 minutes till lunch. If there are any online, we really want to encourage. I know Sree's got a big following, so if you are seeing anything out there, anybody want to raise their hand for any more questions? I know maybe you have some things that you would like to bring up that I didn't bring up from a different perspective.
Well, one thing I just want to just share with all of you was some of you are like me on a lot of panels, and one of the things that was different in panel world and TV world is that in TV we put people on the air for an hour's discussion with almost no prep, right? There's breaking news, you just do it. But in panels you have like 3 telephone calls that you have to do, and then you do a lot of back and forth. Are you free on Wednesday? All this telephone tag before you have the conference call to plan the planning session for the panel. And David, and thanks to David, this entire panel was done on a Google Doc. The actual, I've never seen this before, maybe you all have, but this was the first panel that I've ever been on where the entire discussion was a very concrete discussion in a Google Doc that David created. And I'm going to push every conference to do that. Of course, if it's a very complicated topic or something else, it's good to be on the phone. But the amount of time we waste doing the prep, and then when you get to the panel, you almost never discuss all the things that you discuss on these conference calls, which, so I want to salute you for actually
Sree,
this
I have to
innovation.
say, no, honestly, we sent the Google Doc out to every panel. So if you could imagine the work on our
Yeah, I
side
can
to
imagine.
get 40 people to get their conferences together, you're all busy people. So it was near impossible for us to get everyone on the same page. But I have to say that the education panel, all of you, we had our panel done 3 weeks ago, right? We already knew what we want. I wish that I don't want to point fingers at the other panelists, but there was one panel in particular where nobody responded, but pretty much all of them.
I think it's a good metaphor, though, for the difference between an educational CDO versus an institutional, corporate CDO, is that we're in the business of collaboration.
Right.
We're in the business of surfacing great ideas that generate with other people. And if that's what the business we're in, we're in the wrong line.
Does everyone know what I'm talking about? There may be some people who don't know. We put a shared document up in the cloud, and all the contributors contributed to it. I didn't get 50. Imagine if I sent out 5 emails to 5 people on one panel, 5 on another, and 25 people get back to me in email, and then I send out 25 emails and 25 more come back. I mean, you can't manage that. So having everything in the cloud on a shared document made life so much easier. As a matter of fact, we had our social media team pre-create tweets. A lot of these tweets were created weeks ago. We knew what you guys were going to talk about. We knew what their Twitter address was. We knew what their titles were. So instead of sitting back there trying to figure out, what do we tweet? What's that guy's name? Did I spell it right? Did I get the right Twitter address? They're not worried about any of that. They're basically cutting and posting. So like whatever you can do to make life easier when the conference comes around, and I have to say, you were a delight to work with, really, to put all that together. Thank you for mentioning that. It's a great point. We have a question from Twitter, Tracy Cooper. Thank you, Tracy. Do you see any Ivy League schools offering BSBA degrees online in the near future?
I don't think so. And I think that, so if the question's about undergraduate education, I think the Ivies and the schools that care about deep, deep quality, which there are dozens and dozens and maybe hundreds of schools that do, that there is something very special about an undergraduate experience. You don't go to Columbia, Harvard, or any of these great schools just to learn something. You go there for the experience of connecting and the networks that you make. Our president, Lee Bollinger, likes to joke that he's actually running an intellectual version of a dating service. What he's saying is that, of course at a campus there is actual dating, but you're making these connections that'll last you a lifetime, and you're learning how to deal with other people. There are some examples of people who have hacked these education things where they've done, I think there was a person who did like an entire MIT curriculum all online and did it all in 6 months or what, they're the things you could imagine people would do. But is that person, does he have a better education than somebody who went to a class and sat and talked and discussed and argued? Those are the things that, so I don't think that you're going to have entire online stuff. That doesn't mean that there aren't other types of education that can be done online, including Columbia is already doing all these, as I said, master's degrees. But in the undergrad space, I'd be a big proponent of keeping them kind of small. We met a professor from Princeton who taught a MOOC with 49,000 students. What? And he said one of the things he learned is that the internet is a whiny place. And you can imagine that if you have one, in a class of 10, you have one whiny student, that same percentage with 49,000 people. But one of the things is that he went from teaching groups of 10, and that's so special, to groups of 49,000, and those are not invalid. I mean, neither is the model. And so anybody who says they've figured out this stuff is wrong. Mm-hmm. Anyone who condemns MOOCs and everything else on this 18-month window is wrong. And anyone who says it's the salvation of the world and the best thing since anything is also wrong.
I think it goes back to the point of polarization is what sells headlines. These
Right.
extreme points of
Sure,
views. It's one
exactly.
thing or another.
One
but I think the
sentence.
value of the liberal arts education, residential experience is never going to go away. And I think one of the interesting things is, when our president travels, is in the U.S., people say, well, what's going on with MOOCs? What's going? There's this this hysteria around online education. And she goes abroad, and they say, can you build a campus where we are? Please, can we have a Harvard campus? So it's this real tension that globally, I think the value of the liberal arts and residential education model is very much respected. And there's certainly issues that need to be resolved. But, as Sree says, there's no one silver bullet.
So I'm going to be contrarian here because 99% of the people in this country, unfortunately, cannot go to Harvard or MIT or Columbia. And it costs a lot of money to go to school. And most of the people in this country, they go because they want a job at the end of it. And right now, 50% of the people that graduate from school, from college, do work that does not require a college degree. So there's something with the system that is broken. Not a high elite university, but in general, university for the masses, I think is broken because students are not getting what they're expecting to. So the issue is a very large issue that we can talk for an hour, but the issue is can we make the system more transparent, more unbundling the degree so that you have visibility to the jobs at the other end. And what digital learning allows you to do is build specific curriculum so that you can get skills necessary to get a job. There are many people that are starting today and they don't know what will be the outcome. So I think that MOOCs and that type of education allows for that transparency. There's always going to be some physical part of it. If you're a nurse, if you're a doctor, you have to have physical and real training. But maybe you don't have to go to a lesson in a school to get that because it's probably too expensive to do. And there are some professions like software engineering and design that don't require certification. So you just require a portfolio that you can show in GitHub, you can show in a design side. So the way people get prepared and the way people are credentialized to get a job will change because I think the system must get much more efficient than it is today.
Oh, fascinating. Yeah,
I'll just also add that I joke around that coming from the media world, I'm well suited for this job because a lot of this reminds me of 1997, where the idea, if you remember, was let's just give everything away, build eyeballs, build community, and it'll all work out. And in 1997, there was one newspaper with a paywall. What paper was that? The Wall Street Journal. Today, there are 350 newspapers with paywalls, right? So we have seen this dance before, where just the idea that everything can be done online and just given away is not quite true. But I agree with Bernardo, and he's raised an important point. For the first time in 2 consecutive State of the Unions, the president has raised the issue of cost of education. And that's heightened the awareness suddenly all over every campus. And it's something that we have to care about. And we have to ask the question about how do we tackle this? And is online going to solve all the problems? No. But what we're doing does cost. There is a cost to that, and there's a recent article about how many jobs that never required a college degree are now the minimum qualification is a college degree, and that means society needs to adjust its thinking because this was a piece about the example they gave was a law firm where the person running papers, I mean nothing to do with the law, had to be a college. There was a minimum requirement that they wanted was that you have to be able to have a bachelor's degree. So.
Amazing. And Bernardo, obviously being a corporate entity versus university, how do you just self-disrupt, I guess? Are you going through JV? Are you going through M&A? Or are you building it yourself?
It's very tough because there's a continuous battle between P&L and growth, correct? And the thing that many of the models that might have a shot to be successful in the future require a lot of volume. So one thing is to make money from very good services on 5,000, 100,000, 500,000 students. But then if you go to the extreme is how can you build a model where you can reach 100 million students and make money from it? If you look at LinkedIn and Zynga and Facebook, they make $4.5 a user a year. So you need very large scale, and media knows that very well. So what is a model for education? If we think very, very small in a small neighborhood, you have to have high order value. But if you think about the world, 2 billion students in total, there's a play there where scale can be interesting.
It's amazing. Boy, I don't mean to dominate. Please, questions. Tristan Lewis, who is actually creating if you know mobile app development, he is making it as simple as posting on a blog. So keep track of Tristan.
Well, we see,
What's your Twitter handle, Tristan?
At TNLNYC is the Twitter handle, or at KeepScore for the company. In terms of those discussions, it's always an either or. But will we see some kind of hybrid model where some of the commodity classes, a lot of, say, for example, the 101 classes that you would see at an undergraduate level moving online, and then some of the more advanced classes still staying on campus? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think one thing is clear. We won't know without 2 things, which is experimentation and research. So I think there are a lot of models out there, and there's going to be a lot of iteration, whether that's around course delivery or pedagogical results or revenue. I think those things are going to shift. And I think the other piece is research. And I think that's why edX was formed by Harvard and MIT to have a nonprofit that's thinking about, what's really working more than, what's appearing most in the media.
And I think that there are two things that are difficult to solve. One is practice. You need to have practice. You have to guide practice. Again, if you're a nurse, you need to practice how to put an injection. There's nothing you can do online. So that will always have an offline component. And the other one is certification. I don't think that problem is easily solved when a degree is important. So that also might require some physical presence and so forth. So I think it would be a dual model for a long time.
Stuart Alsop, thank you.
So you've all mentioned the big MOOC-based operations that have come out of the universities, Coursera and Udacity and edX. There's another one called Minerva Project, which is really interesting, that raised a bunch of money from a VC. And in this conversation between sort of elite education and, I don't know if Bernardo would accept that Kaplan sort of represents the other end of the spectrum, but more vocational or transactional kind of education, there's this prospect that Minerva is talking about, that you can provide a really high quality, elite style, Harvard quality education to the masses, but the masses in this case would also be people that are smart and could qualify for Harvard but can't possibly afford to pay $80,000 a year. And you can do it on a scaled basis for $10,000 or $12,000 a year, and by removing the buildings and the things that your guys' endowments pay for. And I really don't want to diss your endowments, because I hope to get money from them eventually. But
my kids eat because of our endowment. So.
But you're right, Stuart. Thank you. That's Ben Nelson, former CEO of Snapfish, raised $25 million from Benchmark Capital. Is that right?
So
yeah.
just a quick thought on that. I think we should point out that at places like Harvard and Columbia, because of the endowment, we're able to give an education to anybody who they pay what they can afford at the undergraduate level, right? I forget what the exact situation with you folks is, but for undergrads, if your family makes less than $60,000 at the very top schools, because we're lucky enough to be able to afford it, it's free. If you can get in, you get. So just I want to make that note. And so if you know people in your lives who, because of their circumstances can't afford to go to a good school but could get in, tell them about this. This is something that many people don't know, that this is true. So now about Minerva, which is looking to build this, I think we should have as many projects like that as possible. I'm all for that, and I hope that things like that will succeed.
Great. Any other questions? This has been a fabulous panel. Please thank our panelists.